There comes a moment in every person's life when everything they thought they were begins to fall apart. The goals that once mattered lose their meaning. The faces around them start to feel distant. The reflection in the mirror becomes a stranger's face. That moment, the quiet breaking, the collapse of everything familiar, is not the end. It is the invitation to begin again. It is the whisper that says, rebuild yourself. But rebuilding is not about pretending you're fine or covering the cracks with forced smiles. It's about entering the ruins of your own being and discovering what still breathes there. It's about facing the parts of you you've buried, the anger, the fear, the mistakes, and turning them into the foundation of something real. You cannot rebuild who you were. That version of you no longer exists. What waits ahead is someone wiser, stronger, and truer, but only if you dare to meet yourself in the wreckage. So before you rise again, you must first look within the ashes, because the journey of rebuilding does not begin with strength. It begins with honesty, with surrender, and with the courage to face your own truth. The fall before the rise is not just a poetic phrase, it is the rhythm of transformation itself. Every human being experiences moments of collapse when the life they built begins to crack beneath them. It could be the loss of a dream, the end of a relationship, the failure of a plan, or a sudden realization that the person you have become no longer feels like you. These moments are not coincidences. They are the natural process of the psyche calling you back to what is real. Rebuilding yourself begins not when things are perfect, but when they fall apart. The collapse is not punishment, it is initiation. It strips away illusions, comfort, and full strength, leaving behind the raw essence of who you truly are. Most people resist this fall. They try to patch up what is breaking, cling to what is leaving, or deny the pain that has entered their lives. But the more one resists, the deeper the suffering becomes, because rebirth requires surrender. It asks you to let go of the identity that once protected you but now confines you. When life breaks you open, it exposes everything you have tried to hide. The fears you never confronted, the insecurities you buried, the disappointments you minimized, they all surface. In this chaos you feel naked before your own truth. You can no longer pretend to be the person others expect. The masks crumble, and in that painful honesty lies the beginning of transformation. To rebuild yourself, you must first see yourself as you are, not as you wish to be. This is the hardest part. To accept that what you once believed to be strength might have been avoidance, that what you thought was love might have been attachment, and that what you called certainty might have been fear in disguise. Yet without this recognition, rebuilding becomes impossible. The structure of your life cannot stand if its foundation is built on falsehoods. The fall is therefore a sacred destruction. It clears the ground for something truer to emerge. When the old structures of your mind, your habits, your relationships, and your beliefs collapse, space is created, and that space is the soil for rebirth. It is tempting to rush through this emptiness, to fill it quickly with distractions or new goals, but true rebuilding requires stillness. You must stand among the ruins and listen. Listen to the silence beneath your thoughts, the voice that has always been there but was drowned out by noise. It speaks not in grand declarations but in whispers, guiding you back toward authenticity. The fall teaches you humility. It reminds you that control is an illusion. It humbles the ego, forcing you to recognize that you are not the architect of fate but a participant in a larger unfolding. There is a quiet dignity in accepting your fall. It means acknowledging that life cannot always be conquered. Sometimes it must be surrendered to. It means realizing that failure is not the opposite of progress, but its foundation. The person who has never fallen has never truly known themselves, for it is in the descent that you meet your own humanity, your vulnerability, your pain, your limitations, and through them, your capacity for depth. The fall strips away superficial ambition and forces you to question what truly matters. It demands that you redefine success not as winning, but as understanding. To rebuild yourself after such a collapse is to live from a place of inner truth, not external validation. When everything falls apart, it is an invitation to rebuild not what was, but what can be. The pain you experience is the breaking of the shell that enclosed your understanding. The grief you feel is the price of transformation. If you stay with the discomfort long enough, if you resist the urge to escape it, something begins to shift. The heart opens wider, compassion deepens, and wisdom takes root. You begin to see that the fall was never a failure. It was a necessary passage through which you could rediscover your strength. The old version of you had to die so that the truer one could be born. In that death and rebirth lies the essence of rebuilding yourself. It is not about fixing what is broken, but about creating something new from the ashes. Something that reflects who you are now, not who you were before everything fell apart. Facing the shadow is the most difficult and necessary step in rebuilding yourself. Every person carries within them a hidden side, the parts they deny, fear, or refuse to acknowledge. These shadows are not just negative traits, they are repressed emotions, forgotten dreams, unhealed wounds, and suppressed instincts. They live beneath the surface of consciousness, shaping how we think, act, and feel without our awareness. When we ignore them, they grow stronger in silence, influencing our behavior through projection, insecurity, anger, or shame. To face the shadow means to turn inward, to look directly at the aspects of yourself you have avoided for years. It requires courage, honesty, and humility, because the shadow will show you truths that are uncomfortable to see. It is not the enemy. It is the forgotten part of you asking to be understood. When you begin to rebuild yourself, the shadow appears as resistance. You might feel irritation, self-doubt, guilt, or sudden sadness without knowing why. These emotions are the voice of your hidden self calling for attention. Many try to suppress these feelings, labeling them as weakness or negativity. But suppression only deepens the divide within you. To rebuild authentically, you must bring these hidden parts into light. This means admitting your envy, acknowledging your fear, confronting your pride, and accepting your mistakes without judgment. It is not a process of self-condemnation but of reconciliation. You are not meant to destroy the shadow, but to understand it, because within its darkness lies your unclaimed power. The shadow forms in childhood when you learned which emotions were acceptable and which were not. You were told to be good, polite, strong, or successful, and in trying to meet those expectations, you pushed away the sides of yourself that did not fit the image. Perhaps you learned that anger was dangerous, so you buried it. Perhaps you learned that sadness was weakness, so you smiled when you wanted to cry. Each time you rejected a piece of yourself, the shadow grew heavier. Over time, it became the unseen force shaping your choices, relationships, and reactions. You might notice it when you overreact to someone's behavior, when you judge others for traits you secretly possess, or when you sabotage your own success. These moments are not coincidences, they are mirrors reflecting your unhealed inner world. The people who trigger you the most often represent the qualities you've denied in yourself. To face the shadow is to see through these mirrors and take responsibility for what you project onto others. It is a painful process because it dismantles the image you built to survive. The ego resists this confrontation, insisting that you are only what is visible. The confident one, the kind one, the logical one. But rebuilding requires truth, not appearances. When you meet your shadow, you discover that your anger hides passion, your fear hides sensitivity, your arrogance hides insecurity, and your sadness hides depth. Every dark aspect conceals a gift, waiting to be reclaimed. The task is not to suppress these emotions, but to channel them consciously. Anger becomes courage, fear becomes intuition, sadness becomes empathy. What once felt like darkness begins to serve your growth instead of obstructing it. Facing the shadow also means taking back the power you've given away. When you deny a part of yourself, you unconsciously let it control you. It decides who you love, how you react, and what you avoid. But when you bring it to light, you regain that power. You start living from awareness, not from unconscious habit. The more you acknowledge your shadow, the less it controls you. You begin to respond instead of react, to understand instead of judge. You become more compassionate toward others, because you see in them the same conflict that exists within you. This confrontation is not a single moment but a lifelong dialogue. The shadow never disappears entirely, it evolves as you do. Every stage of growth reveals new layers of what you have yet to integrate. Rebuilding yourself means continuing this dialogue with honesty and patience, knowing that light and darkness are not opposites but partners in your becoming. The shadow, when faced with understanding, transforms from an enemy into a guide. It teaches you humility, self-acceptance, and depth. It shows you that to rebuild yourself is not to erase your flaws but to integrate them, to become whole, not pure. The more you face your shadow, the more authentic you become, because you no longer fear what is inside you. And in that fearless self-awareness, real transformation begins. Integration over perfection is the heart of true transformation. Most people spend their lives trying to become perfect, flawless in behavior, emotion, and image. They measure their worth by how close they come to an ideal that never truly exists. But the pursuit of perfection only deepens the conflict within. It creates a war between who you are and who you think you should be. Every mistake becomes shame, every imperfection a reason for self-criticism. You begin to divide yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts, trying to live only through what you deem good, while hiding everything that feels wrong, weak, or messy. But this division is an illusion. The human soul cannot thrive through denial. To rebuild yourself, you must abandon the pursuit of perfection and embrace the art of integration, bringing together every part of you, both light and dark, into harmony. Integration begins with acceptance. Acceptance does not mean passivity or resignation. It means seeing yourself clearly without distortion. It is the recognition that both your strengths and your flaws belong to the same wholeness. When you accept your anger, jealousy, fear, and insecurity instead of repressing them, they lose their power to secretly control you. When you accept your failures without self-hate, they transform into wisdom. Integration allows energy to flow where perfection creates resistance. The parts of yourself you resist become sources of pain, while the parts you accept become sources of strength. The paradox of healing is that wholeness comes not by cutting away your darkness, but by embracing it with awareness. You rebuild yourself not by becoming someone else, but by becoming fully yourself. Perfection is rooted in fear, the fear of being unworthy, unloved, or inadequate. It whispers that you must earn acceptance through performance. Integration, on the other hand, is rooted in love, the quiet, patient love that says you are enough even as you grow. This love does not deny your flaws, it holds them gently, allowing you to evolve naturally. Perfection chases an image that can never be sustained, while integration accepts that life is a continuous process of growth, decay, and renewal. You will never arrive at a state where nothing needs improvement, because to live is to change. The goal is not to freeze yourself in a flawless ideal, but to remain fluid, aware, evolving, and honest. When you seek perfection, you fragment yourself. You create an outer self for the world, and an inner self filled with suppressed emotions. You smile while you're in pain, you pretend to be confident while feeling insecure, and you seek approval to mask your doubts. This disconnection breeds anxiety and exhaustion. But when you integrate, the mask begins to dissolve. You no longer need to perform, you simply exist as you are. You begin to understand that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the ability to face it without shame. You realize that authenticity is far more powerful than perfection, because it connects you to the truth of your being. Integration brings unity between the inner and outer worlds. You no longer live in conflict with yourself, and that inner peace radiates into your relationships, your work, and your purpose. Integration also means making peace with your contradictions. You can be both kind and assertive, confident and uncertain, strong and sensitive. The mind seeks clarity through labels, but the soul thrives in paradox. To rebuild yourself, you must learn to hold these opposites without collapsing into one or the other. This balance is the mark of maturity, not the elimination of flaws, but the ability to live with them consciously. In integration, you stop judging your emotions as good or bad. You start listening to what they are trying to teach you. Anger may reveal where your boundaries have been crossed. Fear may protect you from danger. Sadness may remind you of what truly matters. Each emotion serves a purpose when understood, but becomes destructive when denied. The process of integration is not immediate. It unfolds slowly through moments of awareness, compassion, and forgiveness. It asks you to meet yourself repeatedly, in your silence, in your mistakes, in your solitude. It is about learning to coexist with your humanness rather than escaping from it. In that coexistence, a quiet strength emerges, the kind that doesn't need validation or perfection, because it is rooted in truth. You become grounded, real, and free. Integration is liberation from the false ideal of who you should be, and a return to the truth of who you are. It is the bridge between the broken pieces of your identity, forming a whole that is imperfect, yet complete. A whole that no longer seeks perfection, because it has found peace in being whole. The inner journey is the foundation of all genuine transformation. Many people try to rebuild themselves by changing what is outside, their surroundings, relationships, appearance, or possessions, believing that if the outer world looks right, the inner world will follow. But no matter how many times you start over, move to a new place, or reinvent your image, the same feelings eventually return. You cannot escape what lives within you by rearranging what's around you. The real rebuilding begins when you turn inward, when you stop running from your own reflection and begin to listen to the quiet voice beneath the noise. The outer world is only a mirror, and if the reflection is broken, changing the mirror will not fix the face. The inner journey is where you meet the source of your thoughts, fears, and desires. It is where the roots of your suffering and your strength lie hidden. Most people fear looking inward because the mind is not always a gentle place. It holds memories that ache, regrets that burn, and emotions that demand to be felt. But every wound you avoid becomes a wall between you and your peace. The journey within requires you to pass through discomfort, not to drown in it, but to understand it. Pain becomes a teacher when you stop treating it as an enemy. It shows you what you have ignored, what you have suppressed, and what still seeks healing. Rebuilding yourself is not about constructing a new version of you on the surface. It is about healing the inner foundation upon which your life stands. When the inner structure is steady, the outer life naturally begins to align. This journey inward often begins with silence. The world teaches constant motion, endless distractions, and noise disguised as purpose. But silence is the doorway to self-awareness. When you withdraw from the noise, you begin to hear the dialogue within, the fears, the doubts, the voices of the past, and the fragments of your forgotten self. At first it feels overwhelming, but gradually the chaos becomes clearer. You begin to see patterns, how your fears shape your choices, how your guilt keeps you stuck, how your pride hides your pain. With awareness comes understanding, and with understanding comes freedom. The mind that once ruled you with confusion becomes a space of clarity. The emotions that once controlled you become signals instead of storms. The inner journey demands honesty. You cannot rebuild yourself while lying to yourself. It requires the courage to ask hard questions. Why do I seek validation? Why do I repeat the same mistakes? Why do I fear being alone? Each answer peels away a layer of illusion. You discover that much of what you called identity is built from others' expectations, the voices of parents, society, or past experiences. Beneath those layers lies the authentic self, the part of you untouched by judgment or pretense. Meeting this self is both terrifying and liberating. It holds your true desires, your natural wisdom, and your forgotten innocence. The more you connect with it, the less you depend on the world to define your worth. You begin to live from the inside out, not the outside in. The outer journey can only take you so far because it is limited by circumstance. The inner journey has no such limits. It is infinite in depth and meaning. It allows you to find purpose in stillness, courage in uncertainty, and peace in chaos. It does not demand perfection but awareness. It teaches that healing is not about erasing your past but integrating it into your growth. Every experience, even the painful ones, becomes a stepping stone toward understanding yourself more deeply. Through this understanding, you begin to rebuild your life not as a reaction to pain, but as a conscious creation of peace. The inner journey is also a return to the self you abandoned while trying to meet the world's demands. It is remembering that joy does not come from control but from connection with your emotions, your intuition, and your own truth. As you rebuild yourself from within, your outer world begins to change naturally. Relationships become more authentic, goals become aligned with meaning, and peace no longer depends on external validation. The inner world and outer world cease to be separate. They begin to reflect each other in harmony. The journey within does not end with enlightenment or perfection. It continues quietly, as a lifelong dialogue between the conscious and the unseen, between who you are and who you are still becoming. And with each step inward, you discover that the home you were always searching for was never outside. It was within you all along. Embracing the unknown self is one of the most profound and unsettling parts of rebuilding yourself. It means stepping beyond everything familiar, your habits, your beliefs, your past, and even your sense of identity. Most people live within the boundaries of what they know about themselves. They define who they are through memories,